before you present, I would like to give you a trigger question, so then maybe you can answer this during your presentation. So the first question will be, of course, how can we improve our MSMEs' contribution to GDP? Because we know your topic will be talking about the theory and the framework of how to increase the performance of MSMEs. So please elaborate that on your presentation, and your 15 minutes time starts from now.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Clearly, when we have a large number of women that are out of the labor force and that are not applying for a loan to start up a microfinance enterprise, that is a handicap. So the answer to this and the main message of my presentation would be that more inclusiveness of women into your lending practices will increase GDP investment, and you will increase further your diversification of portfolio.
Okay, thank you for answering that question. You may start your presentation now.
Thank you very much. So the topic of my presentation is inclusive and sustainable economic growth from a microfinance perspective. So I see that there is a presentation there that I will want to have some kind of some degree of control of. But let me just request I do not know exactly how this works, but if you can. All
right, let me see. Okay, I think you can just press the point.
Okay, thank you. We all know that the BRI, first of all, I'm honored to be here. This is an institution that shines and has shined in the minds of academics like myself for at least 20 years. So being here, being able to share with you my ideas, my thoughts on a shining star like the BRI is a great honor. So I want to thank all the sponsors from the BRI, the CEO, and the staff for this opportunity. So here is what we all know about the BRI. It's a very ancient institution. It dates back to 1895 or something like that. We also know that it has been on the spotlights since 1945 because it has participated very strongly with helping the Green Revolution and self-sufficiency in rice during the 1970s. And more recently, the jump to digitalization and the jump to actually making the units, which are one of the distinguishing features of the BRI, the units and subunits all across the country are to be replicated, hopefully, around the world. Because these units are not only very well managed, but they are profitable. So this is what we know about the BRI. Now, these are very general features. It's a complex institution, but now I would like to tell you what I come from. So my first approach to microfinance was when I was dictating a course on international finance. And someone told me, you can lend without collateral in countries such as Bangladesh. So the main approach this time around, 20 years down the road after having spent some time in Bangladesh, is that, it is by far, the institutions there are far less diversified relative to the BRI. They have less distribution networks, and the networks are more or less connected to one another, even in the recent past, and that they have been less adaptive. In particular, the BRI has been exceedingly resilient during the 1997 Asian crisis, and more recently during the COVID crisis. So everybody is very admirative of this institution, and I myself, relative to others, believe that microcredit is key to the bank business model that you have to share with many of us. But where do I come from? I heard your president talking about the Grameen Bank, and here is some of the simple analytics that might help you shed light on the contrast between your lending practices and those of the Grameen Bank. The Grameen Bank is an institution that started in the 1970s, so it's considerably younger than yours, right? It does lend, but it lends without collateral to groups of women. And it lends under the joint and several responsibility default clause that makes repayment rates to be considerably high. Now, it does promote to the extent that a large number, millions of women enterprises are, being sponsored by these microfinance institutions. It makes that, and its replications, I myself replicated one in southern Mexico. What it does is that it promotes investment and it promotes growth, right? Now, what about the BRI microcredit business model? The way I see it, and this is probably very simplistic, right? Number one, here, what we have is that it does require some form of collateral. Number two, that, and these are not negatives, if you want to, if you understand. It is a much more personalized and more flexible approaches to the projects that you finance. They are not straitjacket, and it emphasizes a lot on deposits. It might seem like as if deposits were easy. No, deposits at a micro level are very difficult and costly to get from the micro savers. So you have been leading the micro deposit part. You have a fantastic corporate governance structure in that the BRI knows how to incentivize its managers, how to reward them for their good performance based on profitability. And it has, of course, geographical proximity to just about every micro-entrepreneur across the country and beyond the country, right? So there are lots of over 2,000 ATMs, for example. And most importantly, for me, is that it's one of the very few commercial MFIs that charges relatively low interest rates. So I'm not going to pin down at those that are commercial and are charging exceedingly high interest rates, but yours are of around 12% that not even NGOs would dream of having. So this is, of course, a way of accessing credit. Now, In terms of growth, which is to honor the title of the presentation, you can see that the number of borrowers on the left panel has increased considerably since 1990 to 2021, right? And in terms of rupee, you can see that on the left corner, you see that the growth is there. So growth is there. How about other things that would honor this panel? What about inclusiveness? Well, this is what I want to talk about, and this is probably the main message of my presentation. Probably the rest you knew. You knew that you were excellent. But I believe that unlike many other microfinance institutions that lend mostly to women, here we have around 20% of our clients at BRI that are women. So why should we focus on women? First of all, they are the poorest of the poor. Secondly, relative to men, they are much more disempowered, and inclusivity is about including empowerment. And most women have not yet started what you would consider a microenterprise. They have not gotten yet to industrialize a product where you can just show it in a bag or in a can of marmalade or whatever. They are not yet there. So including them would be a very interesting idea, if only it was profitable. And I'm going to argue that it will be profitable. So how can we actually do this, and why do we do it? We do it for social reasons. First of all, women are the backbone of health and education within the household. So giving or putting more money into their pockets can actually be very good for your young generations. Indonesia is a young country that deserves to have mothers that are empowered and look in priority at health and education. Now, from the financial perspective, women are less mobile. So it is very easy to track them down. And you don't need much collateral if you can actually live close to a woman that doesn't move much. They don't come to Jakarta or to Bali on a regular basis. It's men mostly. So repayment rates are high. Women are known to be safe investors. The type of projects they engage in are safe. So these are safe investments from a financial standpoint. And with digitalization, you can actually empower a large number of women that are not taking or being not being taken into account to their full potential at the BRI yet. So, is this possible for an MFI like the BRI? And my answer is yes. Look at the profitability that you've got. And these are, of course, numbers that come from international organizations. You can see that the profitability has gone up by all standards, by all measures, off balance sheet profits in blue, on balance sheet profits in red, and total pre-tax profits in green. So what the proposal that I will want to make to you today is to actually use part of those profits to finance inclusiveness of women in a way that we would call in economics cross-subsidization. So at the very beginning, of course, these tiny transactions, the tiny loans that women might be asking for their petty trades or for whatever activity they want to take, because they also have to look after the house, is not going to be profitable because the transactions are very low. But as you grow in scale, you can become more profitable, and you can be sure that your investments are sure. So, as you all know, we are in the month of Women's Month, and tomorrow is International Women's Day. And so this is my wish for the BRI, that you include women, and that much more than you would have already done. And by doing so, you will be meeting your financial and social objectives. Now, why do I think that this is a great opportunity for the BRI? Because it is probably going to be the leading institution that by commercialization will actually do not deviate from its social objective of helping and getting women on board, the poorest of the poor. Thank you very much. Taramasaki.
All right, thank you very much, Professor Beatriz, for your presentations. We will have follow-up questions later on during our Q&A session, but for now, I will go to our next speaker, which is Ms. Mayada El-Zoghbi from KIT Knowledge Unit. So your topic will be opportunities and challenges for sustainable microfinance on global stage. So you're independent, your institution is an independent center of expertise, education, and hospitality dedicated to sustainable development. So maybe as a trigger questions that you can answer through your presentation is, how can Indonesia develop an inclusive ecosystem for MSMEs? Because we know from the minister's speeches previously, it is very important for us to develop that ecosystem in order to make this financial inclusion strategy to be sustainable.
Thank you so much. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Salamat pagi. I am Egyptian, just so you guys know, and of course I recognize all the Arabic language, so it's wonderful to be here. So like Professor Beatriz, for me BRI is an institution that's an icon, because I've been in inclusive finance for almost 30 years, and when I studied economics and inclusive finance 30 years ago, we studied a case study on BRI. So that's how long I have known the institution and how much it has, it's been this icon for me, like the Grameen Bank, like BRAC, and like Banco Sol in Bolivia. So BRI stands up next to these other greats. I thought, because most of you probably don't know KIT, and I didn't know KIT because I am new to KIT myself. I've only been there a few months. I was at CGAP, which many of you guys know, and I was also at the Center for Financial Inclusion in Washington before. But I joined KIT just a couple months ago, and like BRI, it is an old institution. It's over 100 years old, and it has a relationship with BRI in the sense that it's based in the Netherlands, so it has actually colonial history. And it was actually established as a colonial institute. Like BRI, which has gone through all of these reforms and changes, KIT has gone through massive changes as well. It is now a completely independent entity. Our patron is the Queen of the Netherlands, so there is some affiliation with the Queen. However, we are a fully independent entity. We used to receive government subsidy. We don't anymore. The way we work is we're basically a research organization. We always partner with organizations around the world who are implementing organizations. What we do is we try to improve learning. We use various research methods. We learn together. We then periodically also test and pilot particular solutions. So for example, when you're talking about increasing women's participation, this would be something that our organization could do with a partner. And then, of course, we share our learning globally. All right, so my talk is really around digitalization. That's what I'm going to be talking about, and micro and small enterprises. And so why do we care about this topic? I mean, we're talking about inclusive growth. We know that everything in this world is digitizing. very rapidly. So the World Bank just yesterday released their new report called Digital Progress and Trend Report for 2023. And they say that in the last few years, just during COVID, 1.5 billion people are now on the internet. So globally, 5.3 billion people are now accessing the internet. That's 2/3 of the world population. In Indonesia itself, you see the numbers here. The growth in the digital economy in Indonesia is pretty remarkable. Something around 20% compounded growth every couple of years. So it is a fast evolving issue all around the world. In Indonesia, you also have almost all of the necessary inputs for the digital economy to actually be inclusive and to support as many people as possible. You have over 200 million internet users. Most inhabitants, 64% of inhabitants already have cell phones. Almost all households, just under 90%, have phones in the home. MSMEs, over 2 million, are already using e-commerce, and 90% of merchants have already adopted QR payments. So Indonesia, in many, many ways, is fastly becoming a digital economy. The question I have, and the question that we need to explore, is: are MSMEs participating in this digital economy? Are they actually benefiting from all of these technology trends that are happening around them? You've heard this statistic many, many times already today, so I'm just going to go really quickly. So obviously, MSMEs are really important for the Indonesian economy. They're a major contributor to the workforce. They contribute significantly to GDP. And compared to the world, the rest of the world, MSMEs are actually a bigger part of the economy here in Indonesia compared to other countries. Well, technically, theoretically, micro and small enterprises could benefit hugely from the digital economy. They can benefit from how they source their inputs. For example, by accessing supply chain finance digitally, by getting access to digital credit, by participating and buying from e-commerce platforms, by ensuring the business through InsurTech solutions. They can benefit through the production processes with new tech solutions that are helping MSMEs with inventory management, with digital accounting, with e-invoicing, and so on. Most importantly, they can benefit through sales and increasing their markets. So Minister Sri Mulyani said that Indonesia wants to increase exports. Well, e-commerce is one critical way how most countries are increasing exports. So allowing MSMEs to participate in the e-commerce platforms is a very critical way to support that issue. And then, of course, the digital solutions also help MSMEs manage their customers and then retain relationships, help their customers access credit themselves, and so on. And all of that needs the digital infrastructure, and that's your question. That digital infrastructure requires investments. It requires investments that reduce friction in how transactions happen, reduce friction in how MSMEs participate in the digital economy. And so increasingly, countries around the world are investing in digital public infrastructure. The one that's the country that's most well known for the work that it has done is actually India. So India is an incredible case study that Indonesia can learn from in that it has a unified UPI, which basically everyone has an identity, very easy to get on digital platforms, and it has built up the rest of the infrastructure for easy transactions. So platforms are already happening. It's coming in at the airport yesterday, you see all the signs, you see Grab, you see the platform economy is everywhere already. It's happening all around the world. It's not just happening here. These are probably some of the names you've already seen, you already know about. But they're happening in many industries. E-commerce is the biggest, I think, that I think is most relevant for MSMEs. But there's also many platforms that support the workers. For example, if an MSME wants to do delivery, having something like a Grab or a GoTo to deliver the goods is very useful as well. So delivery, ride sharing, as well as there's a huge number of ag tech players, platforms that are supporting the ag value chains. So again, you guys know this better than I do. In Indonesia, this is really, I would call it one of the top markets for the digital economy. This market is thriving. It is the growth of some of these platform companies are remarkable. In my world, we think of China was probably the #1 in terms of the digital economy. India has been surging, and Indonesia is not far behind. It's much more advanced than other regions of the world. Okay, so going back to my question around MSMEs, are they participating from this? Are they benefiting from this digital revolution? Well, my prior organization, we did research with micro and small enterprises in Indonesia. We also did research in India and Nigeria and Colombia. And we collected 6 waves of data every 2-3 months during COVID, because everyone assumed that COVID was going to force micro and small enterprises to sell online, right? Because they couldn't do things in person. But what we saw was that, surprisingly, in our data, only Colombia, you really started to see a large, consistent uptake of digital platforms. Indonesia, because of the MFI we were working with, it was not BRI, it was another MFI, their customers, many of them tried digital platforms. They tried to sell, they tried to accept digital payments or make digital payments, but then went back to cash right after COVID. And so there was no consistent usage of digital technology. And I'll explain in a minute why. But we did find that the MSMEs that did participate in the digital economy, that were actively using and continued to use, were more resilient to the pandemic. And we see that everywhere, that MSMEs that are participating in the digital economy, and that actually also came out from the World Bank report just recently, that there is consistent improved resilience when you're participating in the digital economy. Now, data from Indonesia, research that's been done here, shows that there's really high awareness among micro and small enterprises. 74% of MSMEs are aware of all of these different digital platforms that you see there. However, only 20% are using consistently. So there is a gap. There's a gap between awareness and usage. So why don't MSMEs why aren't they adopting digital channels? So we see that there's easy usage, which we'll call low stakes, when you don't need to have formal registration, where you don't need to have a financial account. And this is the social media, social commerce. And a lot of MSMEs in Indonesia are using this. They basically use social commerce, Facebook, WhatsApp, TikTok, to market their goods. But then the transaction itself is using cash. So there's a limit to that kind of growth for a business, right? Because it still requires someone to go and meet, and there's an individual personal transaction. The high stakes is really when you're on the e-commerce platform, when you have a financial account, when you're transacting financially. And this is where MSMEs struggle. They struggle to make that leap from the social commerce to e-commerce. So what will it actually take to get micro and small enterprises to adopt digital channels? So what we found in our research is that trust is a huge issue. Trust is the area that most organizations need to invest in. Most people are very afraid of making a mistake. Now, I mentioned before, many people tried during COVID, but then stopped and reverted to cash. And a lot of that has to do with you make a mistake and you don't know what to do. You don't know who to call. There is no person to call. And this is, you make the point about women, this is especially the case for women. Women have the much greater fear of especially doing financial transactions on digital platforms. Most people are afraid of the pricing. They don't understand what are the costs. Well, what does it cost me when I use this? Most people are afraid of taxation. When we did focus groups, we realized people are actually, they think that if they go online and it's formal, they're going to be taxed. They think that, they also are afraid that when they make their prices known online, and people can shop and compare prices, that they will lose out to their competition. So these are the fears that are in the minds of small businesses. So an organization like BRI or anyone else that's working with micro and small enterprises, you have to think about, well, how do you make them trust the system and feel comfortable that they have recourse if they make a mistake, or that all their other fears about taxation and other things will not actually come to fruition. Another key driver, we feel, is embedded finance. So I've already said that e-commerce is a very important issue for expanding marketing of your products and selling when you're a small business. When you embed the finance inside the platform, that creates a stickiness. The MSME is more likely to actually use the e-commerce platform when everything is embedded and is easy to use. Now, let me just say there's been experiments around the world with embedding with a fintech or embedding with banks, and there have been mixed results. There's a lot of friction still. I can't say that there is one example around the world that stands out that's been frictionless. So this is still an area that needs a lot of testing, a lot of innovation, and a lot of progress. I already mentioned India. India is well known for creating that infrastructure that has enabled the digital economy to flourish. And it's now known as the digital stack, which is creating a unified or digital ID that anyone can access. It allows creating a digital payment system that is safe and transparent, and it allows trusted data exchanges so that there's shared data between different players. So these are the fundamentals of the digital stack, otherwise known as digital infrastructure. You guys know Indonesia better than I do, but I can say that Indonesia is already in the process of building its own stack. It's already making payments much more frictionless. It's developing solutions that are tailored specifically for micro and small enterprises. So it has a lot of what's there for MSMEs to really take off in terms of participating in the digital economy. I have one more slide on Indonesia around what the government is doing, but you've already heard that from prior ministers today, so there's a lot of initiatives to support micro and small enterprises. So again, all the building blocks have been put in place. Whoops. Oh, okay. I had one more slide that didn't come in there, but what more can be done? And this is where understanding customers and understanding and tailoring solutions for them is actually very important. And organizations like mine that focus on research, as well as academics who focus on research are actually your friends in this situation. We can help in addressing some of the bottlenecks that keep micro and small enterprises. So one of the things that, for example, that we don't believe that a one-size-fits-all solution makes sense. You already pointed out that women have different capabilities, different endowments. They come into the business world with a different set of skills and capabilities. So oftentimes certain groups need other solutions or more tailored solutions, whether that's rural customers, whether that's the elderly, whether that's people with different livelihoods, for example, farmers. So you have to tailor and test different solutions for different groups. One of the areas that I think is really important is to understand why people are dropping out, why people are testing, and why do they drop out, and what would it take to rebuild trust. So that's an area that deserves a lot more attention and research. Bringing people into the system, what we call onboarding, helping that onboarding process be seamless is a critical issue. That's the easiest way, rather than having to try to reteach someone or having to rebuild trust. The easiest way is to do it right from the first time and make sure that that first experience that they have is seamless and safe. So building trust, creating safety in the system are absolutely critical components to support micro and small enterprises to benefit from the digital economy. And I will stop here. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Please give applause to Ms. Mayada. Right, so I really like these two speakers are highlighting the important roles of women in economy. And I would like to praise BRI or BRI for choosing 2 women speakers and 1 man speakers. So these panelists already shows that BRI is supporting the inclusivity in our society. So please give a hand to BRI. That's great. So now, going to you, the only male on the panel today. All right, Mr. Jiro, so before I give you your 15 minutes, maybe you can also explain to us through your presentation later on, because your main topic is fostering inclusive growth worldwide, strategies for equal economic opportunities. So we know that ADB at the moment have a vision of promoting financial inclusion in Asian countries. So how can we fast forward the process of fostering economic opportunities for everyone? You know, because Indonesia is a very vast country with a lot of people live on different islands, maybe disconnected to each other sometimes because we have so many people spread around the equator. So how can you maybe help to foster that in the future?
Thank you very much for the question. Many of that actually is going to be included in my presentation here. But just the key points, I would say that it's very, very complicated. So there are a lot of things need to happen. But I think it will be the inclusive financing and then MSMEs are going to be very, very critical for achieving that goal. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that today. So if I could just move on to the presentation. Would that be okay? Yeah. All right. Thank you. So thank you very much, Sebastian. Thank you very much. I'm Japanese, and I don't necessarily follow the Arabic word, but I try to learn Bahasa Indonesia. Today, I'd like to talk about the growth, inclusive growth, and particularly in conjunction with the small and medium, micro and small and medium sized enterprises, MSME. But I would also like to bandwagon on the comment on the women's side in terms of to draw your attention to the statistics that I've seen that more than 60% of MSMEs in Indonesia is actually being managed by women. So in terms of, we're celebrating International Women's Day tomorrow. At this occasion, I wonder if you could please join me in applauding the tenacity and the contribution of the women entrepreneurs to the Indonesian economy. So now, and thank you very much for the invitation, BRI Research Institute and BRI. I don't know how many of you actually know, but ADB and BRI has quite a long history. If you look at this ADB book about the history of ADB in Indonesia, you will see that in 1971, ADB approved a loan to modernize BRI, and it was the first ADB loans in the financial sector in Indonesia. So we have a very long history going back, and then if you could look at the photo in the middle, some women working on a kind of gigantic machine. I would imagine these are the typewriters. I'm sure they are the latest technology at that point in time. But we've been working with the BRI and then also the financial sector in Indonesia for some time. Today I just want to talk a little bit about inclusive growth, but at the same time I want to also mention that the vision of the Asian Development Bank is to get the prosperous, inclusive, resilient, and sustainable Asia and Pacific region. So inclusive growth is very much in the middle of what we aspire to do. So just a quick word on what we think is inclusive growth and why it matters. We consider that is the growth coupled with the effort to gain more equality of opportunities. And then also in a simple terms, it's the growth that bringing everybody together and then participate in benefit from the economic growth. Of course, Asia, including Indonesia, has done a very remarkable job in growth and income growth and rapid growth in the past several decades. But at the same time, in that process, it is also true that inequality has risen. Particularly in the last few years through the pandemic, the effort for the poverty reduction has been set back in the past 2-3 years. Of course, empirical studies also very clear that inequality and poverty does hurt economic growth in many ways because it hurts the basis of economic growth. It is about the social cohesion or the middle class or the human capital. So it is good to inclusive growth. Actually, is something that matters, and it is very good for the sustainable growth in Indonesia. I think we have learned on various, in our experiences, what could be good, what kind of a policy would be useful to derive inclusive growth that would very much involve in increasing the labor income share through the growth process, or involving efficient fiscal measure, particularly using of the tax measures to try to tax the income transfer across income groups, and then also trying to make sure the spatial equality is there. To urban-rural disparity, or in particularly in a country like Indonesia, between the islands, the income disparities, we have to be consciously watching for the consequence of that. Now, when we look at the current Indonesian economy, of course, everybody knows that Indonesia have come back in a growth rate, recovery in the growth rate very quickly since the downturn in 2020, which experienced negative 2.1% growth, but with the strong and then timely and bold macroeconomic actions and management. One of course, Minister Sri Mulyani was one of the very, very important part of it. Came back to 5.0%, 5.05% growth last year, 5.3% the year before, which is comparable to the pre-COVID level of 5.0%. But if you look at the aggregate, it has come back. But if you look at a little bit down into the detail, you see that on the right-hand side diagram, it is the output level that we have right now. We have about 3.0% gap, output gap, compared to where we would have been. Also, in terms of the labor market side, unemployment rate has come down to the very similar level to the pre-COVID time, but also it came out in earlier discussions that informality, many of the employments were absorbed within the informal sector, which typically have a lower paid jobs as well as less protection. So not necessarily good for career development for people getting out of the college and etc. On the poverty rate also, overall aggregate level seems to be coming down very similar to the pre-COVID level, but at the same time, the income disparity that's shown in the Gini coefficient has gone up, and then it has been staying at the high level. So having these things now, so what can MSME do? Basically, MSMEs could be, and actually responding to the first question about whether MSME is the backbone of the Indonesian economy, it is the backbone of the Indonesian economy because it contributes to 60% of the growth, and then also in terms of particularly on the employment side, 97% of the employment are actually happening in MSMEs. So that filling the gap, output gap, employment, formality, informality, poverty, income disparity. Many things can actually be helped. Addressing those issues can be helped by the strong growth in the MSME sector. So, but the constraints. So, how can we make MSME grow? This is also a classic issue. Many countries are facing it. Typically, they have a very limited access to finance, which we already talked quite a lot about this already. I'm not going to delve into the detail. But also at the same time, the access to information is also known to be a constraint for MSMEs to grow and then also have a strong, robust growth. Yeah. So, and then these two stories, the access to finance and the access to information and also access to skills, those two areas that converges those two are really the ICT, the information and communication technology. To harness the power of information communication technology is going to be a critical area, whether it is going to be done through the government policies or whether it's going to be done through the entrepreneurial efforts. But that is, more on the methodological point of view. But as a policy sort of objective, try to help companies to adopt the ICT would be a very important part of the policy. According to our study, a 1 standard deviation in global index of digital entrepreneurship system is associated with an 8.2 percentage point in the probability of a new business innovating. So it is going to be very important. So how can we sort of have this digital economy more pervasive among the MSMEs? 3 issues. Of course, there are a lot of other issues, but literature seems to suggest there are at least 3 areas. One is on the providing digital business development and also skills development is more on the training side. And the second point is the digital finance services that we have been talking about quite a lot. This is going to be very, very important, particularly in the area where the infrastructure and people go to Warung, right, to get the services, which is very, very useful. And then also the more sheer infrastructure, both in terms of hard and soft infrastructure, to enable those the services in using ICT. So the first point about the digital development and skills, of course, this is going to be including a mixture of a lot of things, raising awareness of facilitating access to low-cost, particularly the plug-and-play type of technology solutions that will be provided to MSMEs, and then also building a tech-savvy workforce, the younger generation, more tech-savvy, interested to leverage on their interest, and then also the ability to work and the familiarity to work with the technology. This is quite some of the examples of some of the countries are working on. Is basically trying to show that many countries are working on this area in different bits and pieces, government-led, but also many of them are working together with the private sector. In that case, of course, I would be, the potential for an institution like BRI to be able to contribute a lot on this area. It is whether it is about the training side or whether it is about the, adopting the smart manufacturing solutions or working with the private sector to develop the skills of the younger people. The second point is also about the financial services. This is nothing new to everybody, but the sheer sort of amazing development of the technology. I'm still a generation who still remembers the time where we didn't have even the mobile phone, right? So from that particular instances, right now it is a remarkable development in such a few decades that we have experienced. Particularly the mobile phone penetration, cloud computing, blockchain technologies, and also AI. This is going to grow even faster. So there's need to be government sort of the policies and directions to incentivize those development and adoption by the MSMEs will be important. And thirdly, it is, just basic, you have to have infrastructure, hard infrastructure, to ensure connectivity across the country, particularly archipelagic country like Indonesia. It is going to be very, very important to have the different islands also have the similar and then good connectivity, adequate speeds and volume. The right-hand side scatter diagrams basically shows you the correlation between the level of the legal and regulatory framework and then also the dependable legal system and then also the ability for the digital entrepreneurship to happen. There seems to be a correlation. Of course, this kind of scatter diagram correlation is a tricky thing because of this causality directions may be one way or the other. But anyway, there seems to be a very important institution, regulatory, and then legal framework is also to enable the adoption of ICT would be very important. So finally, just the key messages, just to take away on 3 from these many bullets. First, MSMEs are the backbone of Indonesia's economy. Strengthening MSMEs post-pandemic should be, strengthening MSMEs should be a priority in the post-pandemic policy of the government and also the corporate sectors. Second, also the lingering impact of the COVID-19, as you saw, the output gap, and then also the informality, and then the poverty and Gini coefficient is need to be dealt with in various forms, and MSME can play a very, very important role. And then access to funding, financing, and then access to information will be a key component of it. And lastly, ICT is really a vital in improving MSME's growth. So with that, thank you very much, and terima kasih banyak.
Terima kasih. Thank you very much, Mr. Jiro, for presenting your ideas on this topic. So, ladies and gentlemen, we have 15 minutes for a Q&A session with the 3 speakers on the stage. So let me go back to Professor Beatriz, because you especially highlight the importance of including women in the economy. So you said to be inclusive is to include women in the economy. So we also know from your presentation that you also mentioned arisan. So before I ask you a question, how do you know about arisan? And do you think that's going to help if we can use that to improve women's
The network of
engagement?
women, and we talked about trustworthiness, is well known. And Aristan is one form of it upon which many microfinance organizations worldwide have built. So some of them have become a lot more sophisticated, particularly in Africa, but it is a way of social collateral, trust. We talked extensively about it, and yes, Aristan can be a way to actually create a network of self-help groups that mimic the Grameen type bank that is worldwide known to be targeting very poor women. So why not?
Because it's very interesting that you mentioned about Arisan, because we also know that BRI has succeeded in attracting 23% women as the customers. How can we increase that number so then more women can be included? Because maybe, for example, the BRI's officials and the directors already mentioned about the brilliant agents. So can they maybe include more women to be the brilliant agents so then more women can also be encouraged to join the process?
Well, the Aristans, I mean, they are ancient institutions, informal institutions, and that's one way of starting up, building a network of women. And the other one is by emphasizing health, education, schooling, where women are very involved. So it is not surprising that in many clinics or in many schools, women attend regularly, and microfinance seers are there to actually see the opportunities to help them out in their business, in paying the fees of their kids, etc. So I will start with Aristan. I will go to hospitals, clinics, maternity wards, and education institutions to just see how we can create and enlarge our clientele of women.
All right, thank you very much. So that's probably an input or suggestions to the BRI staff about how to include women in their economic system. Okay, next question to Ms. Mayada, because you already mentioned about digitalization. As you said, 1.5 billion people on the internet already, and then 19% Indonesian are connected to internet. But I would like to highlight a fact in Indonesia, because as you said again, to create an inclusive ecosystem, we should digitalize MSMEs activities. But in Indonesia, nowadays we know 90% of MSMEs on digital platform are resellers instead of producers, right? So should we change this condition? How can we change it if we have to? Because, you know, it's very important to be producers so then they can export instead of import, right? Because that's the main point of growing your economy, to do export instead of imports. Can you answer that question, please?
Yeah, so I want to answer the question also before, just really briefly, and I think you were spot on. In addition to the specific sectors, agents are one very important link to bring more women into the system, because agents are your front line, right? So that is how people participate in the, so having more female agents does work, and there's research that proves that. In terms of how do you bring more producers on e-commerce versus just resellers, this is what I was saying in terms of you need additional research to understand what is actually, what's the bottleneck that producers are experiencing. So I was in Indonesia 4 years ago, and I did this. I visited various institutions around the country, and I went to many producers where they were actually on digital channels. So there are many that are using it, but a lot of them, the initial onboarding, they had to have some assistance. They had to have some assistance to get an online presence. There had to be someone that physically helped them actually create the account. There had to be, you know, someone help them with taking photos of their products. There's a little, that onboarding process is the hardest process. It's the biggest hurdle that some of these types of businesses need help on. And then, of course, you need the kind of the delivery system, the logistics system to also be efficient. But I saw some of these producers, and they were selling, and they were able to ship their products. So it can be done. But in this particular case, the MFI that I was visiting, they actually help and onboard these producers. So this is something, if BRI wants to do more of, it really has to think about what additional staff does it need beyond its loan officers. What can they do to actually work with the MSMEs directly to get them on the platforms?
Right, so that means they have to be more engageable, and then can you maybe be more specific on what kind of steps that BRI can do in order to be involved in this kind of process?
Yeah, I mean, some of the e-commerce platforms in Indonesia have tested. They've created subsidiary divisions that actually support these merchants to get on the platforms. It is costly. It's something that requires subsidy and investment, right? It pays off in the long run. So what you really need are staff who are going to go find the producers, right? First find the producers, but then also help them with the technology. Help them get on, create. They have to create a profile of the business on the platform, right? They have to post their merchandise. So you would have to help them figure out, how do you take photos? What are the kinds of photos that sell? Do you understand? So these are the kinds of things. And then finance is critical, because for once demand increases for a merchant or for a producer, they need to be able to deliver. Because once they're discoverable on an e-commerce platform, demand will pick up. And so you have to also work with them on making sure that they can continue to produce and making sure that they can continue to send the products. So you're going to accompany them throughout that. So you're really getting into SME development, right? Not just finance. You're really helping the SMEs actually grow.
All right, so maybe BRI staff has to be more progressive in doing their job. So not only financing, but also developing SMEs as well. So then that can be more productive instead of just doing the end side of the process. All right, thank you very much for answering that questions. Now to Mr. Jiro, you said that inclusive means equal opportunities. We also learned that the Gini ratio trend in Indonesia is increasing. So can you recommend ways on how microfinance can become more empowered in a limited assistance institutions in Indonesia?
Well, yeah, I mean, microfinance, it gives the sort of the space for the kind of safety net for the people in the poor, low-income countries. When something happens, natural disasters, etc., crises, when they have a means to lend money so that they will be able to use that money to respond to the crisis and then the transient situation. But also at the same time, of course, building the businesses and then making it bigger, that will lead them towards getting out of the poverty line or near the poverty line, right? So in that sense, microfinance has been tested in many countries, and then also it has been proven to be a very, very effective area that an institution like us are very much interested in working with the government. But one thing also also is very, very important that we think is very important, and we're also working with an institution like OJK in doing this, is the digital literacy and then also financial literacy of the people who will be using these services. Yeah? So in many cases, they don't know how to use it, what happens when where to call, this kind of thing, a lot of educating kind of efforts that need to be done. And then with the very wide network like the BRI has, I mean, they will also be able to help in sort of training them and then helping them building their skills to really use these financial services online in a most effective way that will be beneficial to them, which will bring them out to the from the poverty level to beyond.
Okay, maybe can you recommend some case studies that we can maybe copy or learn from that to be implemented in Indonesia?
It's very hard to. Every country has a very, very different, evolutions and dynamics, and also how the community is structured. So it's very hard to tell. But I think the talk discussion that I heard about this, using Warun, for example, that kind of activities, very grassroots. I think it is very, very effective, and I think it should be continued that way. And combined with the policy level things from the government side that would enable, and then also regulation that would not make those poor people too vulnerable to different pitfalls of the financial and digital infrastructure. So they need to be combined both. So I don't know, I cannot really tell you what exactly Indonesia should do. At the end of the day, of course, Indonesia has a very, very capable government bureaucracies and civil servant who will also have a very good idea, an innovative idea that we cannot think of at this particular point in time, right? So, and then also the development in the technology is really astounding. It's just beyond our imagination. In the next 2-3 years, you don't know what kind of technology available to us that could change the whole marketplace. Yeah. So.
All right, thank you very much. Please give applause to our speakers on the stage. Okay, before we conclude this Q&A session, I would like to ask all of you one final question, the same question. So if you can recommend one suggestion on how Indonesia can escape from middle-income country trap, what would it be? Maybe we can start from Mr. Jiro.
Thank you very much. I think productivity. productivity
Why
of
productivity?
corporate all across, including agriculture and farmers. I think that's and then technology is very, very important part of it.
All right, productivity and technology. Very good. Thank you very much. Now, Ms. Mayada?
Yeah, I would just say helping MSMEs digitalize, because I do think Indonesia is there's so many small businesses, they're already the backbone of the economy. Helping them grow is going to be the future, I think.
All right, thank you very much. Helping the MSMEs. Now, Professor Beatriz.
In my opinion, there is a very important marriage between actually looking at the product for building trust, for learning, and digitalization. You can't trust something that is not on the shelves, even if this is something that you know about. So don't go via the Amazon way. That's not the way for micro enterprises. Go for actually helping borrowers or small entrepreneurs to actually put up a stand, a stall that will actually show that the product actually exists. So building up that infrastructure could be very important to actually build trust, digitalize, and extend the network and more commercialization of these small and business enterprises.
All right, thank you very much. Once again, give applause to our speakers, ladies and gentlemen. And thank you very much for our conversation. Ladies and gentlemen, we have come to the end of our panel discussion. I think there are three things that may be important from our speakers today. Number one is increasing microfinance contribution on Indonesian economy is important and necessary to be consistent, right? So then it can be sustainable until the future. And then number two, there's a need to develop an inclusive ecosystem for MSMEs so they can have access to financial system, capacity building, and digital networking, especially for women, right? Yeah, not only for the customers, but also for the brilliant agents. So maybe that also an input for BRI to include more women to be your agents.